Shri Krishna and Maha, Shri Gurubhyo Maha. I heartily bow down to all my spiritual dear and near. Now we will read the wonderful commentaries of Sri Swami Chinmayananda on the very famous composition Sri Bhajagovindam by Sri Shankaracharya. This is part 9. When these powers and freedom to use them are allowed, it is relegated not to everybody but only to those members of the community in whom the civilized world has perfect faith that they will be ever just, good, and noble. A full-fledged doctor alone is given the freedom to use his knife on the body of another living member of the society, and the patient may even die bleeding from the wound which the doctor has created, that which would have been a murder of any other member of the society. For the doctor, it is considered as an essential service. Similarly, the man of perfection is one who will not and cannot act selfishly, nor has he any need to court his fulfillment of life in the objects of the world outside, and so this freedom is given to him. The father gives the key of his cash box to his son only when he has grown up sufficiently. If the key is given in childhood or in early youth, the boy, having not realized the sanctity of wealth and understood the difficulties of earning, may misuse the freedom and so harm himself. Only when he has grown to a sense of responsibility and has some experience of difficulties of life does he know the right use of money. Also, it is a fact that the father gives readily the key of his cash box to the son only when he is confident that what the son earns and puts in there will be more than what he will be taking out of it. By his very nature, a man of perfection is incapable of acting against the moral harmony and the ethical goodness in society. Having realized the self, he has become the self in all. The Upanishad Rishis, from their own experience, assure us that a realized saint thereafter lives sporting with the self, reveling with the self, and ever in the service of the world. Such a man of perfection alone enjoys in this world of sorrows and tribulations, of contentious competitions and endless imperfections, of disease and death. The spotless joy of the perfect he alone enjoys, cries Sri Nityananda, to whom this stanza is generally credited. Verse 20, Bhagavad Gita Kinchidadita Ganga Jalalava Kanika Pita Sakradapi Ena Murari Samarcha Kriyate Tasya Amena Na Charcha. To one who has studied the Bhagavad Gita even a little, who has sipped at least a drop of Ganges water, who has worshipped at least once Lord Murari, there is no discussion, quarrel with Yama, the Lord of Death. Three divine exercises for spiritual unfoldment are being indicated here: the study of the Gita, 2. Ganga baptism, and 3. The worship of Murari. Srimad Bhagavad Gita, being the essence of all the Upanishads, a study of its 18 chapters is an intellectual discipline by which we can come to understand what exactly is the secret essence of life, what exactly is the goal of life, and what are the methods by which this goal can be gained. The heavenly Ganges, Akasha Ganga, flowing so high above the human intellectual approach, was brought down to man's level of experience by continuous efforts of King Bhagirath, and today it is emerging out from the pure intellect of Lord Shiva, who alone could stand the onslaught of her devastating wisdom descent. The eternal Tapaswin, the Lord of Kailas, realized this great knowledge, absolute Jnanam, first, and thereafter, at the request of Bhagirath, he gave out the knowledge in a thin stream which could perennially water the country's heart rather than rape the land down with its irresistible deluge. Thus, Ganga stands for the spiritual knowledge. For the Hindu, the eternal river of knowledge of the self that has been kept up till today, flowing from teacher to the taught in an unbroken perennial stream. To sip a drop of this spiritual flow is to enjoy the serenity and the fullness of the inner kingdom. Ordinarily, the modern children of this country, due to the power of tradition and faith, take Ganga to mean the Himalayan river, and like the multitudes, they too have come to a special potency to her elemental waters. In their scientific outlook, this is a faith and there is no convincing meaning. Naturally, they believe and yet they believe not. Some positively decry this belief. What is there sacred in a river? Asks someone. What a colossal ignorance of the symbolism. What is there in your national flag as such, except three colored pieces stitched together with a wheel figure in the center? The sanctity of my country's flag is not in the material contents or the form of it, but in the significance that I have given to it. So too, Mother Ganga is sacred, for this signifies the spiritual wisdom and the flow of it along the teacher-taught unbroken stream. To the ordinary folk, this eternal river and the worshipping it, the ritualism itself, is a great consolation, a wondrous achievement, a consoling action, a purifying religious pilgrimage. But to the seeker of the highest knowledge, who walks the path of knowledge more than the ideal interpreted in the idol is important. Thus, here, in the context of the stanza, the statement, who has sipped at least a drop of Ganges water, should mean those who have at least had a glimpse of the infinite and the higher possibilities of the divine way of living. If the study of Gita gives an intellectual and objective picture of the goal and the path to the scholarly student, a few drops of Ganges sipped from the hollow of his palm give to the ardent devotee the flicker of a joyous vision of the distant goal. To him, the harbor is no more too far away because he has seen the flashes from the lighthouse, and yet he is still in the open sea of life, buffeted by stormy waves of sorrows around him. But he has hopes. He is now confident. The harbor is not far, and he makes a dash towards it. When a ship enters the harbor, it is not allowed to sail and enter in as she likes, but a pilot ship must go out and pilot the guest ship in. The ship that seeks the harbor must have the patience to stand out, constantly sending radio messages to the harbor tower. A seeker who has thus become assured of the harbor at hand must thereafter call out for help, Kirtana. Wait till the pilot ship arrives, Guru, and implicitly follow the forms left by the guiding ship. The piloting in is accomplished in spirituality by the worship of Murari. The weighing the anchor is meditation. Until the ego, Mura, is annihilated, there is no hope of entering the harbor of truth, the glorious state of immaculate peace. The body consciousness and the ego sense arising out of a false identification with matter can be rubbed off only by devoted worship and prayer at the altar of the very destroyer of ego, that is Murari. Withdrawing the mind from all other preoccupations and surcharging it constantly with the memory of the goal, the nature of the cells, is the only method by which intellectual and mental limitations are battered down. When the individual realizes that the life within is the life everywhere present, and in fact, in the supreme logic of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, this is fully endorsed. A seeker who has accomplished all these three, study of the Shastra, glimpsing the goal, and striving to reach it, to him there is no more any fear of death. He is no more questioned by the Lord Death, nor does the seeker care any longer to question about the phenomenon of death. It is interesting to note that in Hinduism, Lord Death is called the great controller, Yama, but for the principle of death so efficiently working all around, existence would have been impossible, nor can creation ever take place. For to create is to annihilate the present condition of a thing, thereby making it into a new form and presenting it in a new condition. Thus viewed, the very creation is a continuous process of annihilation. The question of change can arise only in realm of death. Change is experienced through the vehicles of the body, mind and intellect. When a seeker, through the process of yoga, has transcended these three vehicles, he rises above the realm of change, a realm where infinite existence alone is. There neither is he yet to question or to fear death, nor can the principle of change ever enter to the question him. This is an alternative reading. Not even the death dares to question him. This stanza is traditionally believed to have been given out by Shri Anandagiri. Verse 21 Punarapi Jananam Punarapi Maranam Punarapi Janani Jatare Shayanam Iha Samsare Bahudustare Kripaya Pare Pahi Murare. Again birth, again death, and again lying in mother's womb. This samsara process is very hard to cross over. Save me, Murari, O destroyer of Mura, through thy infinite kindness. The wheel of birth and death is never at rest for the jiva. The individualized ego, prompted by desires, entertained by his imagination and cultivated by his habits, but not yet completely fulfilled, must seek ever fresh fields of experiences repeatedly in each lifetime. Instead of exhausting the existing desires or vasanas, each one gathers to himself a new set of vasanas. We come here for a purgation, but due to our ignorance of the way and the goal, the extrovertedness in us compels us to get ourselves attached to the objects which have a beauty and a charm created by imaginations of our minds, Maya at work. We come with our own vasanas into vasanas playing cross, which is the world of objects and beings. The actual field of man's endeavor to live up to the sahaja vasanas and to the exhaust them through actions undertaken without ego and ego-centering desires, aham mama, so that no new vasanas may precipitate in us, is really the way. By all means act and achieve, but let your actions be in an attitude of dedication, with an idea to serve, in spirit of yajna, says the Gita. Thus, when the existing vasanas are reduced, the thought disturbances calm down, and thus, when the subtle body dies a mystic death, meaning is transcended, the experience is of the infinite spirit. Thereafter, since there are no vasanas in the individual, there are no thoughts in him, and so no subtle body to claim a new embodiment to function in any fresh environment. The causes for all repeated births thus totally cease. Birth is painful. Death, of course, is very painful. So and again, to come to life in the horrid cell of the womb, there to be crushed, twisted, imprisoned, and persecuted by the physical and mental strains and jerks of the mother, is indeed abhorrent, terrible, cruel, and yet, as we are today, we are seemingly helpless. The momentum gathered by this great fall from the perfection is too powerful to be halted all by ourselves. The ego, born out of me, has now become a mighty power ruling over me relentlessly, and in front of this usurper of my bosom, I am but a slave. To free myself from this great inner tyrant, I need now a mighty friend, a powerful and sympathetic friend. And who can it be? O destroyer of Mura, Lord Krishna, save me, help me please, is the ardent prayer unto him, and seeking his feet of love is the only way out. And even here, what right have I, the slave of my own passions, the non believer all these years, to seek his help now? True, I have no faith to meet thee, O Lord. I have nothing to offer thee except my own tears. I have nothing to claim for myself except the fatigue of my indulgence, the sting of my selfish acts, the sweat of my passions, the cords of my attachments. In fact, I don't deserve to be saved. Yet, Lord, I am tired, beaten out completely, exhausted thoroughly, repentant fully, helpless wholly. Here we will stop part 9. We will continue the remaining in the part 10 by praying God for all the best to all spiritual aspirants. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Shri Krishna Namaha, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. I heartily bow down to all my spiritual dear and near. Now we will read the wonderful commentaries of Shri Swami Chinmayananda on the very famous composition Shri Bhajagovindam by Shri Shankaracharya. This is part 10. I surrender myself to Thee and Thy grace. I claim a hearing and expect help from Thee. Art not Thou the ocean of Kripa, of grace, of kindness, and of love? Art Thou not the destroyer of the demon Moha? Won't Thou in Thy kindness take pity on me and once more destroy the old enemy Moha in my bosom, the bundle of my own wretched vasanas? Thus, to surrender unto Him and to sincerely invoke His grace is to create in us divine and godly vasanas, which are the only antidote to the ego and the egocentric vasanas that constantly glamour in our bosom for gratification. Once these are hushed, the song of the flute bearer shall be heard, the blue light of his aura can be seen, the fragrance of his garland of wild flowers can be smelled, the butter of his hand can be tasted, the embrace of the infinite can be experienced. Verse 22. Ratyacharpata virachita kantaha punya punya vivarjita pantaha yogi yoga niyojita chitto ramate balon mattava deva. The yogin who wears but a godabi, who walks the path that is beyond merit and demerit, whose mind is joined in perfect yoga with its goal, revels in God consciousness and lives thereafter as a child or as a madman, a man of realization after achieving the goal and realizing the liquidation of his individuality and therefore of his personal proprietorship over his body, is described in our sacred books as living on thereafter as a child, Balabat, as a madman, or as a ghost. These examples are given to express one or the other aspect of his mental attitudes to the world outside. He is not a child or a madman or a ghost, yet he is like them. He has in him some qualities of these, and so he is like a child, like a madman, or like a ghost. Love and hatred we find even in children. They express all emotions as and when they arise in their innocent minds, but the very next moment they have forgotten all about those feelings. Children are always found to be fully engrossed with their immediate mental mood. They have no capacity to drag the past into present and color the present happenings with the dead past. There is perfect spontaneity both in children and in the perfect seer. A man of perfection also lives from moment to moment and lives fully and entirely in the chaste present. He carries no regrets from the past, nor he has any anxiety for the future. Right here and now, like the children ever do, the man of realization lives and revels. A madman moving amidst us, his mind is full of his own thoughts, and the ordinary folks have no entry into the thought world of the demented man. So too, the man of perfection moves amongst us, and his inner experiences are too deep and strange for us to gauge and understand. He lives amidst us. Often he conforms to the discipline of our social actions, but even though his feet are amidst us in our own world, his head is held over ever above the clouds of likes and dislikes, ego and its vanities, joys and sorrows. He revels in the peaceful state, the Samya Avastha, in the great equipoise. He, in his inner life, walks the path which is beyond both merit and demerit, good and bad, pleasure and pain. These opposites are experienced only when the empirical world is projected by the mind. Merit and demerit cannot affect the perfect, and not even the Vedas prescribe or prohibit the actions of such Mahapurushas. The Upanishad exclaims, for one who is moving about the three gunas, where is prescription, where is prohibition? Fearlessly he moves, alone in lonely jungles and in quiet places, by day and by night. Fearlessly he moves about. Others are afraid of him in due reverence. The ghost is afraid of none. All fear it. Such a man of perfection, his mind totally plucked away from its usual fields of passion and lust, when it has reached a perfect yoga with the goal, has reached its God realization. When such an individual transcends his mind and intellect and treads the surface of the globe, he is no more a slave to his body, and so his body dare not demand anything for itself. However, the perfect man allows his body a minimum of protection, and this is indicated by the godadi, a piece of cloth. In society, everyone has got duties, and duties go hand in hand with rights. If you are to enjoy the privileges in a nation as a citizen under its constitution, you have also definite duties towards the community in which you are living. The lesser the privileges, of course, lesser the duties. It is also very well known that a dead man has neither any duty nor has he any privilege among the living. After the mystic death of individual concept, the ego, the master no more has any right to demand, but out of his infinite love for mankind, he cannot but take upon himself all duties. Thus, a true sage in India, according to our scriptures, serves the society day in and day out, without relaxation, with such as much sincerity and diligence as a selfish man would work for his own personal gains in the world's various departments of activity, and yet a sage takes from the world only a minimum, the barest need. This is indicated by the very traditional uniform of the rishis in India. They lived in the jungles and fed themselves upon wild fruits, roots, and leaves. They sheltered themselves under the trees, preferably very near and burial ground. They kept for themselves, for their use, only a shell called kamandalu. The attitude of taking from life the least but giving back to the life the most is that which earned from the Mahatmas of this country the respect and reverence that we even today show to them. All these ideas are indicated when Shankara describes here that this God man moves in the world, covering himself with only a godadi, a piece of cloth. This is called a patchwork quilt, and it is a shawl made out of all sorts of available cloth pieces picked up by him from the wayside as and when he comes across them, and stitched together at random to serve him as a multicolored, many designed shawl of variety textures. The idea being that since he has nothing more to gain from the world, he does not want to increase the competition of the world by demanding his rights, even for the so called utter necessities of life. What a contrast! today, the best ones among us strive under a philosophy of minimum effort and maximum gain, while the fathers of our culture lived in our land with the healthy philosophy of maximum effort and minimum gains to themselves. The difference between these two philosophies is like night and day, and the joyous life in a cultured society should necessarily be poles far removed from the sorrows of barbarous, uncultured, immoral society. This stanza is traditionally attributed to Sri Nityananda. Verse 23. Kastvam koham kuta ayataha kame janani kome tataha kati paribhavaya sarvamasaram vishwam tyaktva swapna vicharam. Who are you? Who am I? From where did I come? Who is my mother? Who is my father? Thus enquire, leaving aside the entire world of experience, essenceless and a mere dreamland born of imaginations. An individual's life in this world is played out in an intricate web of mutual relationship. In the tapestry of existence, the individuals and their relationship between each other are the warp and woof. A right relationship between me and the objects and beings around me can be maintained only from the standpoint of my awareness and understanding of myself. If I am drunk or mad, or by any other reason, if I have come to forget myself, I will certainly keep an unhealthy and even dangerous relationship with the things and beings around. In this life, we are called upon to keep intelligent contacts with the world around, and therefore the most profitable knowledge is indeed to know ourselves. In our ignorance of ourselves, we become abnormal and act either as a lunatic or a drunken fool. The poison of ego renders us completely delirious, and hence we are made to feel shattered and fall into utter dejection. In Arjuna Sthiti, close observations and intelligent enquiry alone are the methods by which all misapprehensions are ended, be they about the outer world of objects or about the inner world of experiences. In life, it has been well noted that wherever there is a non-apprehension of a thing, misapprehensions about it arise. When things of the world are not understood as they are, they start playing their pranks upon the observer, and according to the observer's imaginations, the world becomes a caricature, at once vulgar and ugly, with exaggeration and lopsided magnifications. Therefore, a spiritual student is advised in Vedanta to exhaustively and scientifically inquire about the subject in himself. Inquire the sources from which we must have risen. Let us not take things for granted. Let us make use of our rational intellect. Inquire where from we have come and where we are bound to whence and whither. Who are you? Who am I? Where have we come from? Who is really my mother? Who is the father? These are the lines of inquiry suggested in the verse, along which we must try to investigate in order to end our misconceptions and reach the true apprehension of reality. This is not possible for us at this moment because our mind is not readily available to turn upon itself and make such subjective inquiries. Our minds are at present too much preoccupied with their enchantments regarding the world of objects outside. Until a mind gets relieved from these dissipating preoccupations, that mind will not have the necessary freedom to apply itself totally within. Vishwam is a pregnant Sanskrit word with an endless width and depth in it, for it contains in its meaningful all the human possibilities of the experiences, physical, emotional and intellectual. Leaving aside, advises the author Yogananda, the entire world of experiences, realize that this is essenceless and that is a mere dreamland born of imaginations. In the empirical field of experiences, everything perishes constantly, and so all are unreal. The Mandukya Karika, Shri Gaudapada, argues and shows us logically that the waking state of experiences are as unreal as our experiences in our dream. Thus, having dismissed all the haunting sense passions from our mind, turn it towards a close observation of our own objective personality. Such enquiries will reveal not only the hollowness of the world of names and forms of endless bewitching enchantments, but it will also reveal the empty vanities of the life we now live. This stanza is attributed to Sri Yogananda. Verse 24. त्वयि मयि चान्यत्रैको विष्णुः व्यर्थकुप्यसि मय्यसहिष्णुः भवसमचित्तः सर्वत्रत्वं वाञ्छस्यराद्यदि विष्णुत्वम्. In you, in me, and in all other places too, there is but one all-pervading reality, Vishnu. Being impatient, you are unnecessarily getting angry with me. If you want to attain soon the Vishnu status, be equal-minded in all circumstances. The teacher here asserts the eternal truth that has been experienced of thousands of masters for thousands of years in all different spiritual paths in our country, and declares that in you, in me, and in all other places too, there is but one all-pervading reality. There are certain truths which are so fundamental in the science that a teacher in it can ill afford to avoid the monotony of their repetitions. Here we end part 10. The remaining we will continue in part 11 by praying God for all the best to all spiritual aspirants. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Shri Krishna Namaha, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. I heartily bow down to all my spiritual dear and near. Now we will read the wonderful commentaries of Sri Swami Chinmayananda on the very famous composition Sri Bhajagovindam by Sri Shankaracharya. This is part 11. There are certain truths which are so fundamental in a science that a teacher in it can ill afford to avoid the monotony of their repetitions. Intellectual students thirst for knowledge, ever hungry for variety, for new ideas, for fresh ideals, and ever new truth declarations. The inner man seeks variety even at the intellectual level. The laborious repetitions of the teacher sap out the patience of the student, and perhaps unconsciously on his face he expresses his restlessness. The teacher, noticing it, openly says here, being impatient, you are unnecessarily angry with me. There is no other way in which this subtle knowledge can be conveyed to the seekers. Repetition alone is the way, for if the student had already understood, he would never have returned to the teacher. When once he has realized the perfection, there is no necessity for him to feel anymore any sense of imperfection. Panchadashi says, only in the realm of multiplicity there are doubts and explanations. In the experience of oneness, there is no doubt, and therefore no answer is needed. Therefore, so long as the student has not realized the highest, the teacher has to talk of the same truth again and again for purposes of emphasis until the student in a flash comes to realize the highest all by himself in his own heart. Thus, it is futile for you in your impatience to feel angry with me, says the teacher. In case you want to attain soon the great realm of peace, Vishnuhood, then the teacher advises him, be equal-minded in all circumstances. Please don't get angry if you are not having the experience of the infinite even after studying all the voluminous tomes of scriptural literature. There is nothing for you to despair of. There is certainly a way to get the fulfillment in knowledge, thus assure the teachers by the general import of their words. To know of love is indeed quite entertaining, but to experience love and be in it is altogether a different and highly enriching experience. Similarly, to know the scriptural contents and to intellectually appreciate the infinite reality is satisfying job, no doubt, but it is not the voiceless fulfillment of all shattering experience, the utter Atma Sakshatkaraha. In order to gain this, it is not sufficient that we have intellectually followed the textbooks or logically understood the arguments in the book. We have to accomplish it solely in our own bosom, for which certain deliberate preparations of the mind are unavoidable. It must be made receptive to the subtle influences from the higher planes of consciousness. The secret is revealed in this stanza. Practice equanimity of mind, samachittatvam, while living in the world. Desirable and undesirable happenings will float down upon the stream of time to meet us, and in all these vicissitudes, to learn to remain unshaken is the practice of even mindedness advised here. The external world of objects and happenings can disturb us only when we have the positive or the negative vasanas in ourselves. Objects conducive to our existing vasanas will attract us, and the objects contrary to our vasanas will repel us. In order to develop the mental equipoise, one must strive to filter away from one's mind all the existing vasanas. This is accomplished through 1. Dedicated action, 2. Devotion to the Lord, 3. Service of mankind, 4. Contemplation upon the highest, and 5. Constant study and reflection. This reminds us of the Bhagavad Gita, which advises the cultivation of this trait as one of the most essential preparations for jnana. Constant even-mindedness both in desirable and undesirable circumstances. This samatvam, equal vision on all things and beings and in all circumstances, is declared by the Gita Acharya as the very contents of yoga. When once this equanimity of mind has been regained, ere long the experience of the infinite shall descend on you, and you shall come to gain the status of one liberated in life, Jivan Mukta. This is the experience of Vishnutvam. Verse 25. Shatro mitre putre bandau makuru yatnam vigraha sandau sarvasminvapi pashyatmanam sarvatrosrija veda jnanam. Strive not, waste not your energy to fight against or to make friends with your own enemy, friend, son, or relative. Seeking the self everywhere, lift the sense of difference, plurality, born out of ignorance. Nobody can afford to hate himself, even when a part of the body is ulcerated and gives endless pain, and the doctor may advise an amputation, yet man hesitates. The leg that kills me with pain is one with me, and I have no enmity with it. But if another one, even if it be my most beloved brother, gives me a little disturbance of mind, I hate him, his wife, and his children. Hatred can come only when we see the thing hated as something other than us. No doubt, my leg is my own, but even then, I do not cultivate purposefully an intimacy with my leg. I never court my leg, nor developed a special friendship with it. It is not necessary. In and through every cell in my body, I live at all spots, at all moments. I am myself an artistic whole, and from the tip of my toe to the roof of my crown, everywhere, at all times, I exist. It is ridiculous for me to give a greater love to any part of my body more than any other part. If my teeth unfortunately bite my own tongue, justice is not meted out by breaking the teeth, for the tongue is as much mine as the teeth are. Automatically, I feel total forgiveness for the teeth, and I comfort and console the tongue that has suffered the tyranny of the teeth. When the whole universe has emerged out from the one womb of reality, who is the other one whom I can afford to hate, nor is there one whom I can afford to quote particularly and love specially. All are his manifestations alone, including me. Thus, the author of this stanza advises a true seeker of this universal harmony around: strive not, waste not your energy to fight against or to make friends with anyone, be it an enemy, friend, son, or relative. It may be asked then, what exactly is life meant for? What exactly is the direction in which one's emotional energy should flow out? The Acharya gives the answer in the closing two lines of the verse. If you are a seeker of the fuller life, if you are thirsty to hear the melody in the harmonious existence, if you are hungry to taste and enjoy the essence of life, seek to realize the one reality which holds together the whole universe into one garland of beauty. The universe is a cosmos and not a chaos. There exists a mutual affinity, a scientific law, a rhythm of mutual relationship in which the entire living world is held together in one web of love. To assume difference in the world is to belie this great oneness in life. In a loveless life of hate and meanness, of littleness of heart and limited viewpoint, there is nothing but suffocation, sorrow, and agitation. Expand, come in contact with the melody of the great flute player who enchants us all to dance our life around him. This there is in fact none other. Shift your attention to this central source of beauty and song, the rewarding vision of this mass of flaming song. In the author's own language, see the self everywhere and rise above the sense of difference born out of stupidity. When my beloved children play with mud and with it look abominably ugly and dirty, do I not see my child in and through the mud and the dirt on him? When my beloved changes her garments, do I not see and recognize her always in and through what she wears? Similarly, develop the vision to look far beneath the externals of life and was to detect the one substratum, the manifestations of which are the convulsions of society, the hysterical expression of love and hatred, together constituting the total world of play around, whatever be the language in which a music is sung. One who has got the knowledge of the raga can very easily detect the melody and enjoy it. For enjoying the tune, the words need not be familiar. Coached in these words, run the ravishing beauty of its melody. Similarly, beneath the surface of the flesh and its fatigues, behind the mind and its wretchedness, hidden under the intellect and its vulgarities, there runs the enchanting chord of beauty and truth. Contact this infinite self and thus rise above the sense of difference, he, you, they, and I. These have a meaning only with reference to the equipment, but the one vitalizing force holds us all together. In case anyone in the world feels unhappy, miserable, neglected, and wretched, it is only his fault and not the fault of the world. The Gita says, you yourself are your own friend, and you yourself your own enemy. Happenings around by themselves cannot storm our within, but we in our false values give them importance, open the doors of our heart, and allow them to come into ransack our bosom with their relentless tyranny. We hate and then we start recognizing hatred reaching us from all sides. The moment we start loving honestly, sincerely, and unconditionally, love of the same depth and texture must reach us back. What we receive in the world is but an echo of our own heart's cry. What we see in others' faces is nothing but a reflection of our own features. To recognize the eternal source as expressing through all the names and forms is to change the very nature of our environment, the very vision of our world around. Kathopanishad expresses this one cardinal truth in the most poetic forms and says, just as one fire, having reached the various wicks, expresses itself as different flames, so the one truth, burning in different bosoms, expresses as the good, the bad, the wretched, and the noble. Ishavasya Upanishad declares that having realized this one substratum in the universe, the man of realization has thereafter no occasion to feel repelled from anything or from any situation. An incapacity in us to be in harmony with the situation or with an individual, and the consequent discordant ruffle in our bosom is called jigupsa. This cannot take place when we see our own self expressed everywhere, just as a mother cannot have any revulsion for her own child, because to her the child is a part and parcel of her own life's essence. Ishavasya Upanishad, while discussing this state of realization, goes to the extent of even exclaiming, what delusion, what sorrow can reach there, where one experiences the oneness everywhere. Verse 26, Kamam Krodam Lobam Moham Tyaktvatmanam Pashyati Soham Atmajnana Vihina Modaha Te Pachyante Naraka Nigudaha. Leaving desire, anger, greed, and delusion, the seeker sees in the self, he am I. They are fools who have no self knowledge, and they consequently, as captives in hell, are tortured. The conditions under which the seeker reaches the state of God realization is painted here vividly by the author Bharati Vamsha. So long as we are not able to get rid completely of all our unnecessary mental agitations and the natural extrovertedness, this subtle melody of the infinite bliss cannot be contacted or clearly received in our bosom. Therefore, the Acharya says, leaving desire, anger, greed, and delusion, the seeker must strive with an enthusiastic alertness to feel the inspired experience of the transcendental reality. Such a true seeker, when he realizes this external harmony in life, understands the truth, not as we generally understand things in the world outside. All our knowledge in the outer world is objective, and therefore we understand it as something other than ourselves. Here we stop part 11. We will continue the remaining in part 12 by praying God for all the best for all spiritual aspirants. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Shri Krishna in Maha, Shri Gurubhyo Maha. I heartily bow down to all my spiritual dear and near. Now we will read the wonderful commentaries of Shri Swami Chinmayananda on the very famous composition Shri Bhajagovindam by Shri Shankaracharya. This is part 12. All our knowledge in the outer world is objective, and therefore we understand it as something other than ourselves. This spiritual truth being the very core of our own existence, when the realization comes, it will not be that I have understood him, but the experience will be, he is I, Soham. That am I, Tadasmi. This is something like discovering after a lot of searching the lost key at last in your own pocket. No doubt the man will cry out, I have got the key, I have got the key. But in fact, there was no getting it. It was only a process of discovering the key that was already there in his pocket, which was lying concealed under his own ignorance of its existence. So too, this perfect state of tranquility is man's real nature. Due to desire, anger, greed, and delusion, this bliss seems to be far from him, veiled from himself, and when his agitations are quietened, behind it stands the truth in all its resplendency. angry and impatient, restless and agitated. When Radha waits for the Lord under the tree, some rough hand sweetly closes her eyes from behind. She protests, gets angry, gets worried, really afraid. Holding the hand that covers her eyes, she fights, howls, curses, and in the end discovers that the very hands that covered her eyes belonged to the very one for whom she was waiting all the time. Once the passions of the heart are removed, truth, self evident, stands revealed as the very eternal sweetness of perfection. He who has not gained this self knowledge, Atmajnana, who has not experienced this infinite perfection, comes to live in a sorrowful misunderstanding that life is a stream of vulgar sorrows, perspiring passions, exhausting desires, and endless sentiments, and he indeed is a crown jewel among fools. Muda Shiromani, in the non-apprehensions of reality, misapprehensions of ego, its desires, greed and anger, likes and dislikes, and such other misapprehensions arise and they create a self-made hell for man to live in and suffer continuously, tortured by them, torn limb by limb by the buffeting waves of passions in his own bosom. Man cries as a sorrowful creature, eternally suffering in a self-condemned existence, in a hell created by himself, for himself. This stanza reminds us of another verse attributed generally to Shankara, which says, desire, anger, greed are looters that stand within the body, ready to plunder the knowledge gem. Therefore, be vigilant. Be vigilant. Therefore, to sum up, renounce the desire, anger, and greed and come to experience in your own personal subjective experience that He am I. This alone is the fulfillment of a man's mission in life. In fact, God alone is the concept of I, is a stupid dream. Surrender and realize. Through right knowledge, reject what you are not and assert your real nature and come to realize the oneness of the life in you and the life everywhere present. Verse 27. Geyam Gita Nama Sahasram Deyam Shripati Rupa Majasram Neyam Sajjana Sange Chittam Deyam Dina Janaya Cha Vittam. The Bhagavad Gita and Sahasranama are to be chanted. Always the form of Lord of Lakshmis to be meditated upon. The mind is to be led towards the company of good. Wealth is to be distributed to shared with the needy. This verse represents the conclusion of the bucket of 14 verse blossoms and it is attributed to the last of the 14 flowers of Shankara who were with him in his particular Kashi pilgrimage of the Acharya. The author is named traditionally as Shri Sumati. It is indeed a befitting last stanza inasmuch as it declares a spiritual program which a student can follow when once he is convinced of the necessity of realizing the highest. Advices of all spiritual preceptors are worded the same, but very rarely do the students try to understand their significance. Here also there is nothing new in the advice as such. It only enumerates 4 unavoidable musts in the daily program of sincere seeker. 1. Gita study. 2. Worship of Narayana. 3. Company of the good. And 4. Serving the needy. The Bhagavad Gita is a summary of the Upanishadic truths with a special reference to their practical application in man's everyday conduct in life. To study them intelligently is to bring about a reorientation in our intellectual outlook on life and in our attitudes to the world of happenings around. It explains both the goal and the path and also gives different techniques of living religion in our everyday life. Study in itself cannot accomplish self-unfoldment in the seeker, although study is absolutely necessary for the intellectual satisfaction of the seekers. The ideas which are rationally appreciated may not bring by themselves their promised glow to life unless one lives them diligently and thus brings them within the subjective experience of oneself. Philosophy enumerates ideals and supplies the logical sequence of thinking by which contemplative minds can come to appreciate the entire implications of the philosopher's viewpoint. But without a definite technique of living up to those values, the best philosophy can only be a mere utopian dream. All the practical methods by which philosophical ideas are woven into our everyday life together in their entirety constitute the very essence in all true religions. Hence, teachers of past like Vivekananda and others cried that religion without philosophy is superstition and philosophy without religion is a lunatic dream. When a seeker has studied the Gita and has understood its logic, he has to plow those perfections into himself, and this is done through religion, indicated here by the term worship of Lord of Lakshmi, to contemplate upon the 1001 glories of Narayana Sahasranama, and thus to learn to surrender ourselves at his altar and thereby get ourselves attuned to him is true worship. This helps to integrate the inner personality, lifting our mind high above its ordinary fields of self polluting agitations. By tuning the mind with the higher, it imbibes into self the noble qualities of very Lord of nobility, Shri Lakshmipati. All our efforts at study and worship can be washed down in a single moment's high tide of passion in the bosom. To protect the fields of our heart from such tornadoes, the company of good Sajjana Sangam is very essential. To be in the company of noble spiritual leaders, cultured men of inspiring vision, will keep us constantly warmed up in our enthusiasm to live up to our ideals. Again, Satsanga helps us to walk the path with an assuring self-confidence, where fear and hesitation, despondency and despair have no chance to despoil our sincerity and eagerness. In the constant association with the noble souls alone can our knowledge of the scriptures become clear and devotion of our hearts can become really deep and firm. An individual seeker may 1 study the Gita, 2 practice religion, and 3 pursue the company of the good. And yet his evolution cannot be assured unless in his daily contacts with his fellow men he has got the heroism to live the spiritual ideals of the one infinite life everywhere. The Lord of my heart is the one indweller in all bosoms. If I fail to revere the Lord in the heart of all, but worship him elaborately with flowers and bells, only in the inert metal or wooden idols, I am, to be certain, not a very sincere and true devotee. Therefore, the teacher here insists that the seeker of the Lord must practice charity. This is very often misunderstood by even those who diligently practice it. Charity must flow from one's own abundance. Thus, the first requirement would be efforts to earn sufficiently in order that you may share it with those who have a need for that commodity which they have not got now with themselves. Charity is an attempt wherein I try to expand and bring into the ambit of my life all others around me and grow to consider the other man's needs and requirements to be as important as my own personal needs. To live seeking thus an identity with at least those who are immediately around me is to live away from the suffocating selfishness and throttling grip of my body consciousness. To ignore the needs of others around is not religion. Religious unfoldment can reach only a heart that has steadily unrolled itself to invite into its chambers a wider circle of loving brotherhood. Verse 28. Sukatah kriyate Rama bhogah paschadvanta sharire rogah yadyapi loke maranam sharanam tadapina munchati papacharanam. Very readily one indulges in carnal pleasures. Later on, alas, come diseases of the body, even though in the world of ultimate end is death. Even then, man leaves not his sinful behavior. In the scheme of development of thought in this sacred philosophical chant, we have the first 12 verses attributed to Shankara and the following 14 verses attributed to the 14 great followers who accompanied the Acharya on one of his trips to Kashi. We have now in these concluding four tailed stanzas a fitting conclusion to the entire sacred chant. Here the spiritual seeker is directly addressed to, and he is encouraged and blessed by Acharya. In the absence of any evidence to disprove, it will not be a very wrong for the purposes of our own inspiration if we accept these closing stanzas at the declarations made directly by the teacher of Advaita. In fact, the vigor of expressions employed, the anxiety with which the impatient words flow down each verse, the depth of significance, and the breadth of their philosophical embrace all definitely point out that it must be the enchanting words of the Master from Kaladi himself. To live in an animal instinct is no strain at all for man because it is a devolutionary process. To fall and slip down the slope of a mountain is much easier than to climb across the summits to its very peak. Evolution is the result of effort and struggle, sweat and suffering. There is no new birth ever possible without its own delivery pains. Thus, to live in the flesh, implicitly obeying its wretched biddings, is universally easy for all. This is simply because the flesh craves constantly, and therefore, to live in sense gratification, no practice is necessary. Everybody seems to be very competent and extremely adept in it. The animal in us is yet to fight against its own low instincts and come to win the divine mastery over the flesh. One who thus freely indulges in excessive self dissipations soon comes to suffer, alas, the persecutions of an invading army of merciless diseases, physically suffering many pains, disabilities, his faculties slowly decaying, and he ultimately comes to a tumble down into some unwarranted grave. Even when death is thus inherent and implicit in the very birth and existence of the individual, man leaves not his sinful behavior. Actions that bring about dissipation of the personality, strength at all levels are called sins, papas. This verse is not merely an uncolored observation of man as he lives now in the world, but there is a strain of sorrow in the very cadence of the verse. Even those who realize that the ultimate destination is death and complete obliteration thereafter of the individual from the surface of the globe, yet he finds it difficult to take himself away from his temptations to do the wrong actions. This is Maya, the vigorous push and pull of the Vasanas to express themselves. They push us into sin and pull us away from our attempts to live the nobler and the divine virtues of spiritual living. Verse 29 Arthamanartham bhavaya nityam nasti tata sukalesha satyam putradapi dhanabhajam bhitihi sarvaitresha vihita ritihi. Wealth is calamitous, thus reflect constantly. The truth is that there is no happiness at all to be got from it. To the rich, there is fear even from one's own son. This is the way with wealth everywhere. If, as the teacher has expressed in the previous stanza, the enchantments of lower nature in us are to be so all powerful in us, then philosophy and its vision are profitless dreams, mere poetic consolations, dreadful opiated hallucinations. A scientist must face facts. He sees things as they are and plans to improve the world and the life thriving upon it. The above stanza is a naked statement of a couple of facts known to all and realized by everyone, whatever be the field of their functions in life. Here we stop part 12. We will continue the remaining in part 13 by praying God for all the best to all spiritual aspirants. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu.